Today I would like to share with you Cherry Road's HIPAA Privacy and Security Training. This course is designed to provide you with an understanding of HIPAA and how the laws impact you as a Cherry Road subcontractor. The key areas of focus for today's training will be on the HIPAA laws, who is covered, what is covered, the liabilities and penalties that can be imposed due to a breach, and finally, the reporting process for a breach. I came across this diagram and wanted to share it with you as it accurately illustrates the many layers and the reach of HIPAA. Not all apply to Cherry Road, but some do. Our responsibilities fall under Title II, further under Title VIII with the High-Tech Act, which focuses on Cherry Road as a business associate of our clients, and Title IV for our own internal PHI information and relationship with our healthcare companies, providers, and brokers. HIPAA impacts Cherry Road in two ways, as a business associate and covered entity. What you may not realize is that all of our clients are requiring Cherry Road to enter into business associate agreements as part of the contractual agreement. Whether a contract is for PeopleSoft services, managed services, hosting, application support, or cloud services, as consultants you may see, touch, and/or test sensitive protected information. We are also bound by extension in the covered entity arena when dealing with our own employees and their protected health information. There are three levels of HIPAA entities. Covered entity. A covered entity are healthcare providers that conduct e-transactions, including hospitals, clinics and groups, healthcare professionals, long-term care facilities, retail pharmacies, and clinical laboratories. Also included are health plans and healthcare clearinghouses. Business associates. A business associate used to be defined as an entity that uses or discloses PHI on behalf of the covered entity. It's now defined as any entity that creates, receives, maintains, or transmits PHI on behalf of the covered entity. And what was typically referred to as a subcontractor is now a sub-business associate. This sub-business associate is categorized as any person or entity to whom the business associate delegates a function, activity, or service. Like the earlier slide, which shows the various types of HIPAA regulations, this illustrates the extensions of the law and how far-reaching it will go when dealing with organizations responsible under HIPAA. For example, a hospital, of course, has all your protected health information, and by extension, the doctors, then to the billing department or company if there's an online component, to the portal provider, then to the hosting provider, and on and on. The same holds true on the consulting side, as in the example of Cherry Road. As a business associate, we implement HR, benefits, payroll solutions with PeopleSoft, Oracle, and Cloud. All of these at some point or another can have real access to employee PHI or ePHI, and by extension, our subcontractors or sub-business associates will also be held responsible under the HIPAA regulations. Written contracts are key when dealing with HIPAA requirements. Covered entity may permit a BA to create, receive, maintain, or transmit electronic protected health information on the covered entity's behalf if there is a written contract in place. A business associate may permit a business associate that is a subcontractor to create, receive, maintain, or transmit electronic protected health information on its behalf if there is a written contract in place. Now that we've discussed where information can come from, let's review exactly what is protected health information, or PHI. It includes past, present, future mental and/or physical health information and its related billings. Any of the information required to receive or to be treated for an illness, injury, or condition of any kind is PHI. This includes all form of communicating that information, whether verbally, written notes, documents, and any form of electronic communication could be included as PHI. Currently, there are 18 PHI identifiers connected to an individual. It is these identifiers that can make it easy to tie information to a person, thus increasing the possibility for someone to use the information in a derogatory manner. It does not include employment records, resumes, performance reviews, salary information, education, etc. Here we have the list of current PHI identifiers. Names, Social Security numbers, dates except year unless over 89, which includes birth, date, admission or discharge dates, biometric identifiers, finger and voice, full face images, any geographical information smaller than a state, phone numbers, fax numbers, email addresses, URLs, IP addresses, medical record numbers, health plan beneficiary numbers, account numbers, certificate and license numbers, vehicle identifiers, serial numbers, license plate numbers, device identifiers and serial numbers, any other unique identifying number, characteristic, or code. Keep in mind this is the current list, as this list will continue to evolve as business communication evolves. Number 3 is interesting as the year becomes an identifier with someone over the age of 89, as they are in a smaller subset of people, which increases the ability to identify. So let's go back to the beginning when we defined business associates. Business associate is defined as anyone that is tasked to create, receive, maintain, or transmit PHI on behalf of the covered entity. And the sub-business associate is a person or entity to whom the BA delegates a function, activity, or service. The responsibility of these BAs are that they must comply with the BA agreement and directly with the HIPAA rules. BAs are subject to periodic compliance audits, meaning the BA can be audited at any time by authorities or covered entities. And BAs and sub-BAs are also subject to direct regulatory actions and civil criminal penalties. Although the HITAC Act became effective in 2009, due to the enormity of the subject, it took another 4 years to provide the guidance on the final rulings and how to apply every aspect of the Act. The 3 pillars of the HITAC Act include the privacy rule, the security rule, and breach notification. The privacy rule has 75 pages, 56 standards, and 54 implementation specifications. It limits how PHI can be used and disclosed to protect patient health care and payment information while attempting to avoid the creation of unnecessary barriers to the delivery of healthcare services. The security rule has 22 standards and 50 implementation specifications. And while HIPAA deals with the integrity of PHI in general, the security rule deals with electronic PHI and in response to the increased use of mobile devices in the workplace. The security rule requires appropriate administrative, technical, and physical safeguards to protect the security of ePHI, electronic protected health information. Breach notification has 4 standards and 9 implementation specifications. A breach is an impermissible use or disclosure under the privacy rule that compromises the security or privacy of PHI or ePHI. This section describes the requirements for notification of the breach to who, when, and how. And while you don't have to know all of these standards and specifications, what is important is to understand they exist, and some of the most basic guidance and behaviors can keep you and Cherry Road out of hot water. The privacy rule has 3 key areas, the first of which is use and disclosures. This describes how this information can be used and what can and cannot be disclosed. While this may seem somewhat self-explanatory, there are nuances that you should be aware of. Next is individual rights. This states that individuals have the right to examine and/or obtain copies of their health records, request corrections if necessary, but also direct PHI to another individual or provider. And finally, we have privacy notices. We all get these in the mail and online as companies are required to provide you with their privacy practices, including the individual's privacy rights with respect to their own healthcare information. These notices are intended to focus on the privacy issues and concerns and to initiate discussions with their health plans and healthcare providers. There are also requirements as to when these notices must be issued. For example, new enrollees, material revisions to policies, and at least once every 3 years. HIPAA privacy has created national standards that all must conform to. Who do the standards apply to? Healthcare plans, healthcare clearinghouses, healthcare providers, and business associates. What do the standards protect? Privacy of health information and the use and disclosure of the health information. And what do the standards do? It gives the patients the right to examine their health information, obtain copies of their records, and also to request corrections of incorrect information. An individual may authorize a covered entity or business associate to access, use, or disclose PHI for any purpose. Authorization must be written, not oral, and may be submitted via paper form, fax, or electronic media. When using and disclosing PHI, everyone should follow these simple rules. Minimum necessary rule. This limits use and disclosure to the minimum necessary to accomplish the intended purpose, and it applies when communicating to other organizations and within your own organization. Limited data sets. One should always use limited data sets, providing only the pertinent information and by stripping PHI of most of the identifiers such as name, phone number, social security number, etc. by blacking out the information. And limiting disclosures. We have the right and responsibility to limit PHI we disclose to the minimum necessary, even if a person or business or agency requests more. Let's review some of the best practices when using or disclosing PHI. For those of us that may transmit PHI, use encryption. Never send PHI over a fax. Use encryption when storing. Be sure to always lock up hard copy files. Always shred PHI, never toss it into the garbage. When discussing PHI, do so in a private area or behind closed doors so it can't be overheard. Lock your computer when you step away and change your passwords regularly. And when calling to discuss PHI, never provide any of the PHI in a message. We talked about the privacy rules. Now let's review the security rule. The security rule focuses mainly on ePHI, electronic protected health information, that is created, used, received, and or maintained by a covered entity. Administrative safeguards are actions, policies, and procedures which manage the selection, development, implementation, and maintenance of security measures that safeguard ePHI. It also helps covered entities to manage the conduct of their business associates in relation to the protection of that information. It requires those that are responsible for HIPAA security to evaluate pre-existing security controls, analyze risks, and document solutions, and then translating those solutions into policies and procedures. Physical safeguards are the rules and guidelines which focus on the actual access and storage of PHI. Facility access controls, workstation use, workstation security, device and media controls, which govern the receipt and the removal of hardware and electronic media that contains ePHI. And finally, technical safeguards are there to protect communications containing PHI when they are transmitted electronically over open networks. There are 4 security rule objectives. First is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all ePHI. Next is to protect against threats, hazards to the security or the integrity of the ePHI. Third is to protect against unauthorized uses or disclosures. And fourth is training workforce members, as we are doing today. Let's just take a moment to review a few of the security best practices. Keep unique user login and passwords. Lock your screen. Keep workstations secure. Ensure the security of portable devices. Manage your data effectively. Install antivirus. Ensure computer security. ensure email security, practice safe internet use, and report security incidences and breaches. And finally, trust your instincts. If something sets off a warning in your mind, it may just be a problem. The final pillar of the HITECH Act is breach notification. Within this, there are three key components: administrative requirements, the actual brief notification, and finally, burden of proof. Here is a quick overview of the administrative requirements for breach notification pillar. Carefully develop and implement policies and procedures for PHI. Implement appropriate administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. Mitigate any harmful effect of a use or disclosure of PHI. Provide privacy training. Develop and apply sanctions for employees who violate the policy. Designate a privacy official. Designate a contact person or office for complaints. And provide reporting and notification processes. It is up to the privacy officer to determine if an incident is a privacy breach and who is to be contacted. He or she will determine next the nature of the unauthorized recipient of the PHI, then focus on the nature and extent of the PHI involved. Whether the PHI was actually acquired and viewed, for example, was the communication returned undeliverable? The extent to which the PHI disclosed has been mitigated. There are three exceptions to a breach. When the privacy officer is reviewing the incident, there are three potential exceptions. The first is innocent access. This is when someone unintentionally accesses PHI but does not further use or disclose. Even though this is not a breach and notification is not necessary, documentation of the violation and the reason it is not a breach is required. Innocent internal disclosure. This is when someone inadvertently discloses PHI to another person who is also authorized to use some PHI but not the PHI disclosed, is not a breach as long as the recipient doesn't use or disclose the information. And finally, when retention is not possible. In this situation, it is when PHI is disclosed but the recipient cannot retain the information. It still requires reporting to the privacy officer. An example of this would be sending information to the wrong person, but it was returned unopened. In any of these circumstances, the incident would not be declared a breach, but would require documentation of the incident and the outcome. For most organizations, the most common breach violations are lack of encryption, employee access, and unsecured records. As we said earlier, business associates under business associate agreements have direct responsibilities and liabilities. BAs must comply with the security rules, which include the administrative, physical, and technical safeguards, policies and procedures, and documentation requirements. Under the BA agreements, BAs have liability for violations. Liability is applied in the same manner as covered entities, and they are subject to the same exposure for civil and criminal violations. The burden of proof falls on the shoulders of covered entities and business associates. The proof would be based on demonstrating that all required notifications have been provided as required, or that a use or disclosure of unsecured PHI did not constitute a breach. This further supports the requirement of documenting every incident and the follow-through that would be required. Let's review a few of the common liability exposures. Impermissible use and disclosure of PHI, failure to provide breach notification to a covered entity, failure to provide access to a copy of ePHI either to a covered entity, the individual or the individual's designee, whichever is specified in the BA agreement, failure to disclose PHI to OCR, which is the Office for Civil Rights, where required by OCR to investigate or determine the BA's compliance with HIPAA, failure to provide an accounting of the disclosures, and failure to enter into BAs with subcontractors that create or receive PHI on behalf of the BA. To give you an idea of how serious the Office for Civil Rights is about HIPAA security and privacy, in 2016 the total amount of settlement fines was $23.5 million compared to $6.1 million in 2015. The stakes are high and continue to escalate. Keep in mind these are civil penalties. We will discuss the criminal penalties next. Some examples are where a BA did not know and would not have known the BA violated a provision. The penalty is at least $100, but not more than $50,000. Where there was reasonable cause but not willful neglect, the penalty is at least $1,000, but not more than $50,000. Where there was willful neglect and it was corrected in a timely manner, the penalty is at least $10,000, but not more than $50,000. You will note that each of these penalties can add up quickly because the amounts stated above are for each violation. A BA with a violation can incur huge fines, and note in the last box that the fines are capped at $1.5 million for all violations of the same identical provision. If there are multiple violations, which there often are due to the interrelated nature of the information, these can be devastating to a business. Let's look at the criminal penalties now. The Justice Department is responsible for criminal prosecutions under the privacy rule, and here are some of the penalties. Knowingly obtaining PHI, up to $50,000 and 1 year in prison. Offense committed under false pretenses, up to $100,000 and 5 years in prison. Offense with the intent to sell, transfer, or use PHI for a commercial advantage, personal gain, or malicious harm, up to $250,000 and up to 10 years in prison. Let's review Cherry Road's internal HIPAA policies and procedures. All employees are required to review Cherry Road's HIPAA security manual. You should have received a copy of the manual by now, but if not, please contact Leanna Lewis. Authorization to ePHI for Cherry Road employees requires approval from both the privacy officer and the security officer. ePHI must be stored only on secured network directories monitored and accessible by password. Laptop and computer security practices. Employees must log off the information system or lock the computer when leaving their desk or when a non-authorized employee is near. And finally, Active Directory policies have been deployed to individuals with access to ePHI to ensure passwords are used to unlock screens. As part of Cherry Road's HIPAA compliance, we implement the following audit processes and procedures. Manage user access. IT maintains a log and control of all users with access to ePHI. Network resources containing PHI is monitored and logged in a window event log. Window event logs are monitored at regular intervals. Maintenance to the physical components of the server room are tracked in the HIPAA Security Facility Maintenance Log. Cherry Road utilizes an ePHI tracking log to track the receipt and removal of hardware and electronic media that contain ePHI and the movement into and out of and within the facility. Cherry Road's internal reporting procedure is clearly defined. It is everyone's responsibility to ensure privacy and security of PHI. If for any reason you believe there could be a breach, whether internally or externally, you are responsible for reporting the incident. When it comes to how, the breach notification procedure and form is located on MyWeb. Reports of a breach must be presented to the privacy officer or to the security officer. So who are Cherry Road's HIPAA compliance officers? Roy Gehrig is our HIPAA security officer, and Leanna Lewis is our HIPAA privacy officer. If you have any questions regarding the content of this training presentation, please reach out to Leanna Lewis, HIPAA privacy officer and benefits manager, Roy Gehrig, HIPAA security officer and IT director, Shirley Fee, director of human resources. As your last step in this training, please take a screenshot of this page, complete the information, and return it to Leanna Lewis along with your HIPAA Security Manual acknowledgement for tracking purposes. Thank you, and have a great day.